Well, good evening. I want to welcome everybody to our third and final lecture in the winter series titled No Borders. And it's my honor tonight to introduce two speakers to New School, Luis and Patricio. Luis Othon Villegas-Solis is the founder of LVS Architecture, a firm exploring the connections between architecture and neuroscience. Luis received a master's degree in design studies from Harvard University in 2003 and a degree in architecture from the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara in 1997. He's the former director of the School of Architecture and Interior Architecture in Monterrey, Mexico. He has written for various publications like the Architect's Newspaper in New York, Mexico Design, and Blink. And Luis is a friend and colleague who has participated in the Neuroscience and Architecture Summer Intersession here at the New School of Architecture and Design. Patricio Ramal is from Guadalajara and currently lives in Austin, Texas. He has degrees in culinary arts and industrial engineering, a certificate in neuroleadership, and an MBA. His recent work lies at the intersection of food, culture, and human behavior. For the past few years, he's been exploring the rituals surrounding food preparation and its effect on individuals and societies. Patricio and Luis have collaborated for 7 years on multiple projects in gastronomy, exploring sensory experience through design. I want to welcome both of you to the New School of Architecture and Design.
Thank you. Sorry. There you go. I'm sorry. We just need to check the sound. Everything is working fine, right? Can you hear? Yeah? Perfect. Thanks for the invitation, Tatiana, and thank you very much for being here. This is very exciting for me, and being here at the New School of Architecture and Design makes me realize that maybe we're doing something that is a new topic or something to discuss for the future. And also, I think this is an opportunity to talk to you as students and faculty, of course, thank you, to share some of our experience and how we have doing this and how this is a topic that maybe we should explore a little bit more and see what happened with our mind when we are using or when we're seducing through design. So that's why we call it Seducing the Mind Through Design, Architecture and the Gastronomic Experience. Can everyone can hear me? Yeah, good. So I wanted to start with this slide. I would like to point that I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing and why we are doing this and how we are doing this. But also I would like to talk about my experiences as an architect and also some strategies of architecture and how we use these strategies to help our clients to develop their business, particularly when they need projects for restaurants or bars. So there's a lot of definitions of architecture. And for me, it's always trying to find what's the right definition. I think there are so many, and we can think about as finding a solution for a problem and within the built environment. So for me, and this is a little bit of the history of myself, I was very influenced by Luis Barragan. Luis Barragan is from Guadalajara, maybe some of you know. And Luis Barragan is a figure that I always learned, well, I learned from the beginning of my career in school. And one of the things that impressed me and is always staying in my mind is that Luis Barragan says memories are, well, architecture is a stage memory. So for me, this is a strong phrase because it can give me an idea of how can we interpret experience, and as an architect, how can we interpret our own experiences to others through the built environment, through architecture. So of course, I learned from Luis Barragan, but then I also learned from the classics. No? I learned from Mies van der Rohe when I was in school, and everyone was talking about these amazing architects. And the moment when I was studying architecture, it was a kind of a, I can say, historic moment because internet started. It was 93, 94. So we were kind of dealing with, still with magazines and not a good internet in Mexico. So we didn't have the tools that you have right now for accessing information. And for us, it was very important to have journals, to have magazines with us all the time. So I didn't know that much of architecture. I didn't know that much of theory as I wanted to. So when I was learning in 94, 97, I was learning from these journals that came from Italy. I had this amazing magazine, Arquitectura, which for me is, it was an opening of my understanding of what's going on in the world, and not just Mexico. So I learned from these star architects. Now I start learning from this idea of how maybe we tend to idealize these figures, or but why we tend to idealize, and why we tend to understand to look to these figures. So I was learning from Rem Koolhaas and then Zaha Hadid, and it was also a time very interesting because we were using technology to build, and the use of computers, the use of CATIA in this case, and like Frank Gehry and other architects. So I wanted to learn more. But I still thought that I needed to learn more about behavior, not just architecture, but experience, how we can understand the human brain and how we behave in a certain space according to light, sound, and so on. A lot of elements that influence the way we behave. So I decided, and I wanted to go to Harvard University because I learned that this school had a lot of opportunities and a lot of architects were coming to teach to this school. So for me, it was like, wow, it's so exciting. I need to go there. So I went there. It was difficult. That I have to say, it was not an easy step, but you know, you fight for what you want. So I went there, and then when I was there, there were a lot of courses, there were a lot of things to learn, a lot of instructors and professors. So I was very lost, and I didn't know what to do. So I talked to one of my mentors or one of my advisors, and I asked him. Hashim Sarkis, maybe some of you have heard of him. So I told Hashim, you know, I don't know what to do. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of courses, and I don't know which path should I follow. So he said, you should take a look at the, you know, at the logo, at the information, at the, I can't remember the name, but we said, you know, this figure that is there. I can't remember the name of those seal, maybe you said, the image, the logo of Harvard. And he said, it says Veritas. You know what it means? And I said, yes, because Veritas in Latin is in Latin, and in Spanish means truth. So he said, okay, go find your own truth. And for me, that was a very important revelation, kind of a eureka moment. You have to find what you really need to know for you, for your life, for your career, for your professional entrepreneur. So I start thinking, well, I really want to do research on behavior. I really want to understand how humans behave in certain spaces and how architecture affects the way we live, our lifestyle. So I had this great opportunity. I met this lady. So I didn't know her. I didn't know who she was. And because it was a moment that we didn't know that much about her, she's Paola Antonelli. Maybe some of you know her. So I was looking for a job at a school, and then they said, you should approach this professor that she needs a teaching assistant. So I just stand in front of her after a lecture, and I told her, Paola, they told me that I'm gonna work with you because I'm gonna be your teaching assistant. And she was like, perfect. I don't have to follow all these other rules. And so she believed in what I said, and I just approached her and asked her to be her TA, and then she said, yeah, perfect. Later, she told me that I was a little bit cheating because I had to do this process of, you know, a process that she should choose who's gonna be the teaching assistant, so I just approached her. But when I was in her class and helping her to do some research, the course was the state of design. And here is when it came this moment of understanding that She was doing this show for the MoMA, Design on the Elastic Mind. And we were doing some research on how design affects our mind. She was doing a lot of research on technology and how these interfaces, computer, telephones, and this is 2006, but the show was in 2006, I believe, but we did this research in 2002, 2003. So we were doing all this research, and for me, this was kind of understanding, well, this is the path I want to follow. How can we create spaces and how we influence as architects with our designs, the mind or people, or behavior. Then I went to New York, I met this guy, this is Enrique Norton, I worked for him for a while. And finally in New York, I went to work for this amazing architect, which is David Rockwell, and we were understanding design, not just thinking about interior design or architecture, but designing experiences. So I got it. I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do architecture. I don't want to do interior design, but I want to do experience design. And what does it mean? It means like, how can I create experience for someone, like to feel the same rituals, the same thoughts, the same feelings I feel? How can I bring those to people? How can I translate this information of something or an experience in the mind of people, in the behavior of people? And then I remember some of these projects that were wonderful were stage, stage design or theater design. And this is something very interesting because this is fantasy. This is something that when we go to the theater, when we see a play, then we become part of the play. We are there. We are inside the play. We start thinking, imagining worlds, imagining things. And this is something that is through language, through stage, through a play that we can get inside something that is unreal, that is a fantasy. So somehow this is something that affects our brain. So how can we do that? How can we recreate this? So I start thinking, well, let's design experiences. No? Let's work on designing experiences. So experience, the name experiencia, they are derived from experiencia or proof, is a form of knowledge or skill derived from observation, participation, and experience of an event coming from things that happen in life, a knowledge that is elaborated collectively. So how many of you can explain how a kiwi tastes? Can you raise your hand? At least one? No? Can you tell me how a strawberry tastes? It is very difficult. Okay, Tatiana, tell me. Tell me really quickly. How a strawberry tastes?
Sweet and sour.
Sweet and sour. What about the kiwi?
Sour.
Sour, sweet and sour. But how can I know which one is which? Exactly. So this is something that collectively we decide how things taste, no? Because at the end, you're trying to find a concept or an idea and share that idea with someone so that someone can understand a little bit what you're saying. So if you're saying sweet, maybe I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's like cane, maybe it's like sugar. Yeah, but what about sour? So maybe it's like lime. What is it? No, so you're trying to find some of your previous experiences with other things, other concepts, and together blend it to create your own experience or to try to show someone your own experience. So this is something that happened with architecture. How can I bring these other ideas or ideologies or forms of thinking into my work to share with someone else so that that person can feel what I want them to feel or how I feel when I go to this space. So this is something that I try to do with projects, and if you do that, maybe you're somehow connecting with people and trying to bring memories. And this is something that I remember from Luis Barragan that says, architecture is like a stage memory. And for me, when he talks about or when you see his work, you can see this connection when he created, he designed his spaces, then you see there are some references that we might know. Like in my case, I know the haciendas and rooms in like the house of my grandmother. And if I go to Luis Barragan's spaces, somehow remind me of my grandmother's house. So these are the stage memory that he's talking about. So what about other experiences? No? What about what's happening in our brain that we can connect with other experience, with other people, and then we can recreate, or we can create or seduce. No? So then there are a lot of questions that I ask: how a place determines how to behave, how architecture defines culture, how built environments shape our experiences, and everything is related to ideologies. No, what I feel, what I think. It might be different from what you feel or what you think, but at the end we connect because we're humans. So there's this similar language that we all talk, which is related to our senses. So there are places for worship, there are places for work. And here, before I go to this, I just want to let you know that I feel like place is different than a space, and we all know that. No, a place I can put it here, but it's like a place is a place where you connect with some activity. So most of the time you're saying there's this place for worship, this place for work, this place to sleep, this place to have sex, place to gather and talk, places to contemplate, places to cook, and places to eat. And this last one is the one, not in the other ones, of course, we all want to think, but in this one in particular, this is what I'm working on: places to cook and places to eat. And why did I decide to go there? Because I think in health, and I think in how the moment of eating and the moment of cooking determines the way we are, because we are what we eat, and also how we connect with others. I think the moment of eating is one of the most important moments in our lives, because it's when you connect with people. And the moment when you cook, and if you're cooking for someone else, it's because you are giving yourself to this other person. You're surrendered with some part of your life to the other individual. So somehow there's a stronger connection, or a holistic connection. So, and also food brings people together. So now we're gonna talk about the experience of food. And the experience of food today marks a strong distinction between eating for pleasure or for necessity. So of course, when we're hungry, we just go there and eat. But most of the time that we want to eat and have experience of eating is with someone else. So let's go back a little bit of the history. And eating out has a long history. Taverns existed as early as 1700s, we see. The record of a public dining place is ancient Egypt in 572 BC, and shows a limited menu. So what does it mean? So the exchanging, or the exchanging for money or for other things, for food, it was important as early as the beginning of our history. So popinas, these are the first, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, okay, there is it talking. I just read that talking, but popina is a place where people used to exchange gold or goods for olive oil, or bread, or olives. So these were kind of the first settles, the first places that people change goods for food. So somehow I relate this, and I was taught to this in Mexico. It's like the taco stand, no? But the first ones, no? The first places that you ate, you go to eat, and then you exchange for something. So this is the first exchanging of food for goods. So this is important because this is in Pompeii, and these are the first Asian settlers of Popinas. And then we have this idea of Mr. Boulanger. Everyone relates this history of the restaurant as why we call it restaurant, because the place that you eat, you went to go to rest. So, but there is other part of the history that says that Boulanger created this broth that was a divine restorative, which means that it was this broth that was sitting there for days, and they were putting food inside this huge casserole, and then they put food, and they were boiling all the time. So they created this broth that people, bring life to people. So somehow this idea of the restorative became the restaurant divine, and then we call it the restaurant. So somehow this is kind of one of the first ideas that we think the restaurant started. And then we have Antonin Carême, that this guy was working first for the royals in France, and then after the French Revolution, a lot of chefs and a lot of people that were preparing food for the bourgeoisie got no jobs because of the French Revolution. So some of these guys started to create these places for eating. So somehow they were creating these first restaurants with a lot of understanding of French cuisine. And we have to understand the French cuisine in 1700s was a big deal. Before was Spain, but then in the 1700s, France was kind of the big empire of food. So they were writing books in food. So this was a very important moment in time. So Carême was one of the first ones that think that we have to create food like really precious. So we are creating a spectacle of the food, and then people come to see and eat these wonderful structures that were at the end food. So then we have a long history of restaurants, and one of the things that happened is Industrial Revolution, and people couldn't go to eat to their homes again. So somehow these first restaurants, these diners or these places to eat started to appear because people couldn't go to their houses. So they started going to eat to these places. This is one of the first ones that we know to recreate the experience. This is Vougean Racine, which is a restaurant, one of the first restaurants in Paris. And this is a restaurant that somehow imitate the Art Nouveau. And this is one of the first restaurants to introduce a theme in the atmosphere. So somehow this plays a huge role in interior design, because this is somehow the first restaurants that introduces a style and architecture to be part of the decor of this space. So it's still there. It's more than 100 years old. So if you are ever in France, you can go to this place, which means the boiling root, the broth, the root broth, or something like that. And in United States, there's a very good and interesting book that is this book talks about these restaurants. I just forgot the name, but it will come back. And these restaurants were like Chinese restaurants in San Francisco were very important, and people were able to go to these Chinese restaurants who were more kind of aristocratic, and for people who could pay a restaurant. So somehow this was a kind of a very exotic to eat in these restaurants at the beginning of the last century. But there's also another story, quite sad, because the first restaurants that appear in America, and particularly this that is from Jacques Carlou, the 9th floor in Montreal, is a restaurant that didn't want to see to the outside for what's going on the outside. So it was the first time that we know that restaurants try to close their surroundings to the outside, because imagine at that moment, a lot of immigrants were coming from Europe, and there were a lot of hunger and poverty and disease. So a lot of people didn't want to eat seeing that to the outside. So somehow restaurants were closed or were in enclosed spaces so no one could see to the outside. The same happened here in World War. That this is in London, and people didn't want to see what was going on outside with the war. So somehow this is a restaurant in, this is the Oval restaurant at the Wellesley Hotel that still exists. And the Fraternity Room, which is a very particular case that happened in New York with the same concept as the rest of the restaurants, that they didn't want to see to the outside, but this one in particular wanted to create a theme of a garden inside the building when it was snowing outside, so you can have this tropical experience in the middle of the winter, so you could go to this restaurant and have a different experience than being in the winter itself. So you got inside this space, and then you feel you are in a tropical environment. So we're talking here that there's the thematic, the theme is already there in the restaurant. So, but we have to understand that restaurants were for elites, for people that could pay food, or people that could pay for something that is a la carte. So there are a lot of transformations in history. So I'm going to be very quick because I want to jump to the next part of our lecture. But also I wanted to point some of the restaurants that were happening in Mexico that were more like the typical canteen, which is very funny because women weren't allowed in these spaces. No, they couldn't go inside these places, and it were just men were drinking and eating in the canteens. And this is something very funny because these were the names that for these canteens, and I would try to translate some of these, but the first one says, voy a ver si puedo, is like, let's see if I can. I don't know why is the name of this canteen is called like that. And the other one is, el sol sale para todos, the sun is for everyone, but sol here is also a beer, so sol is for everyone, it comes out for everyone. And aguantas la otra, which means, can you handle another one? So it's this kind of, funny things of the names of the restaurant, of the branding. So it's something to consider when recreating a restaurant, when designing a restaurant for branding. The other one is Cool Buddies. So this is interesting because nobody, as I said, no women were allowed inside these places. And most of them sell pulque and tequilas, but pulque is a fermented beverage in Mexico made of the agave as well. So these were liquor, of course. These were alcoholic drinks. So the restaurant became a forum for expression of individual desires and moods. This is Inga Britt Gustafsson in 2006, and she's at the Örebro University in Sweden. And we can see places like this. And you remember, some of you might remember this, is the Four Seasons in New York at the Seagram building, which is already closed. It's a shame because they had to move because it was very expensive for them to support this restaurant, even though this restaurant kind of imitated the Roman bath. So it is this idea. And there were a lot of parties going on there. Like once they said that Andy Warhol went inside that pool and they were kind of doing a lot of funny things. Let's just put it that way, So this is a very interesting restaurant because this became the jewel of New York, and people used to give, rings, wedding rings there and proposals. So it was a very important part of the scene of New York restaurant. And I think this is one of the first one that's really created this idea or the idea of fantasy for a place or desire to go to eat out, which is another thing we'll see. So then the theme became an important part of the restaurant. In the 90s, in the early 90s, architects such as David Rockwell started to work for business in this. And of course, it doesn't mean that restaurants are not business, but particularly recreating fantasies for people to go and eat out. So there were a lot of restaurants that were creating this kind of space escapes, places that you can go and have a fantasy. So Las Vegas, of course, but these particulars were the theme restaurants like the Planet Hollywood, the Hard Rock Cafe, the Fashion Cafe. We can name a lot of those that were recreated or that were created in the forest, rainforest cafe as well in the 90s. But something happened between the 90s and 2000 that people got tired of this as well. So because this became a trend, but then later, no one wants to go there because already you had the experience of being in a thematic restaurant. So we have to distinguish what's happening with food and design. So for that purpose, we have to think about eating for pleasure or eating when you're hungry. And this is something we need to make a distinction. So when we talk about pleasure, within the values of stimulation and excitation, two aspects are highlighted. Negative hedonic tone, which is stimulation and search to satisfy hungry, thirst, and psychological needs. Or positive hedonic tone, which is the only purpose is to feel good. The line that separates them is called comfort, which indicates levels of satisfaction, but not excitement. So we talk about these tones when we are designing. We can think about the negative hedonic tone, and this is an image that relates to what I'm talking. Like, I mean, I'm guilty of doing this as well. Like sometimes I'm so hungry that I don't care to eat, a burger from Burger King or McDonald's or whatever. Or maybe for some of you it's a guilty pleasure, but not for me. But if I'm very hungry, I don't care. I just eat something because I just need it. But it's not because I have a pleasure of eating this. This is something that is satisfying my need for hungry, for thirst, for psychological needs. But when I think about feeling good, then we think of positive hedonic tone. This is something important because it's just for the only purpose of feeling great. And when I'm saying feeling great is when you go out and eat with your friends and eat because the pleasure of eating, because of choosing what you really want to eat, and you can pay for it, which is another topic that we will discuss when you have the money to pay for food that you want to eat. So we have the model of McDonald's, and everyone knows this. And this is a model that is very well studied in neuromarketing because in this case, McDonald's has a timing. So for them, it is important that you last no more than 10 minutes sitting there. So how we can create this with furniture. So we create it with furniture, with lighting, with sound. So there are a lot of other things that we can use as strategies to make people feel or do something, to behave in certain ways. So this is an interesting thing because the topic and the case of McDonald's have told us like what are we capable of doing with design. And the case of Starbucks, for instance, the first Starbucks were more related to your home, to your house, to your living room. So you had this furniture that looks like your house or your, like very, very common furniture that you can find in any house in the United States or in America. And I mean, Canada and whatever. And then we have this idea that the Starbucks needed to change and adapt to the neighbors, to the neighborhoods that they arrive. So this is in Soho, and they wanted to recreate the experience of being in Soho and being a little bit different from the rest of the Starbucks. So somehow there's an idea of appropriation and community that is going like a big trend right now. So you have to blend with the place and the neighborhood that you are in order to fit and then to acquire a crowd that can come to your place and eat and enjoy the food. So this is another strategy. So, but music also plays an important role when we're designing a restaurant. Let's say that and this is something from Hard Rock, like if you rises it by 22% in volume and rhythm, people consume 20% faster, 26% faster. And you know why? Because our heart beats to a certain rhythm. And when you put sound and you put music that is very loud or it has a high rhythm or a beat is a little bit higher, then your heart wants to match the rhythm, wants to match the sound that is outside. So that's why we are in these places like, nice, I like that sound. And then you start dancing and then you start getting excited and then you start drinking, That happens with pronto moda or fashion, in these stores that are like, the H&M and stores that are very famous for being fast fashion. I'm not sure how you call it fast fashion, which is why you get there and then you're very excited, you're dancing, and then you had all this excitement in your body and then you buy. It kind of happened the same with these places. So lunch and dinner time should have music with high BPM because we need our consumers to move in and out. Chris Golub, this is Chipotle, Mexican Grill. And they do a lot of research of the 40 principles with the music. They go there and they test the music with the 40 principles. There's a list, right? It's called 40 principles in the United States, yeah, right? The 40 top or something like that. So they just go there and put the music and they check for how long people stay with one song and how fast people eat within the song or within the rhythm. So they can check like if that's a good song that should play in the restaurants or not. And there's another criteria for designing, which is, this is big, VR Kingles, designing for René Redzepi, Noma. This is a very famous restaurant in Denmark, and René Redzepi has done a lot of research with food and the gastronomic experience. So for them, big VR Kingles design a kind of the Denmark or Danish experience, no? Bringing this idea of the cabin, of the wood cabin, and translating this into the atmosphere and what they want to recreate with their food, with experience of food. So we have this, how does this stimulation affects our state of mind? Well, there are 5 premises: psychological, security, sense of belonging and love, well-being, and need for an update. So how does the experience begin? And there are 5 aspects of meal model. 1 is room. Meeting is the second. Third, products, management, control system, atmosphere. When we talk about room, is the first encounter. When you get to the restaurant, what you see and how you connect to the space, and what does this restaurant tells you about the story they're selling and the experience you will have in the restaurant. The second one is the meeting, and the meeting means how you see the people around you, how they treat you, and if you belong to that social group that you go into this restaurant, so that will determine your own experience within the restaurant. So this is important because you are designing for a group, so maybe if you're designing for a particular group, maybe someone that is not from that particular group won't fit into this place. So somehow this is important to understand what's the user. And then we have the products, which are the food and drink, and how you recreate this experience of food and drink within a concept of the restaurant. What are you selling, and how this is related to the space and also to the people that you're designing for. And the management control system, which is one of the most important factors when creating a restaurant, because everything depends on this. And why am I saying this? Because it depends on how you prepare food and how food moves and how food gets to the table. If everything is very well maintained, and we're talking about dynamics and ethics and things that are related for cooking. Let's say if you're selling seafood versus you're selling meat versus you're selling pastries. So this is something that you have to control of the management and administration for the food. And the atmosphere, which is related to all the 4 that we just talked. An atmosphere is about designing the experience within all the other concepts. And here it's interesting because there are some research that says that when you ask people, how do you think about these 5 aspects individually, they never said one is more important than the other. And at the end, the experience when people go to eat out are the experience of hanging out with others and how they feel good with others. So the most important part, and this is something I talk to people that takes my consultants or consultancy or courses, they said, well, I thought we were going to do design, interior design for a restaurant. And I said, no, that's the less important part of this. Is not the design of the restaurant that is gonna make a restaurant successful, but it's gonna, the thing that is gonna be the most important part is how you recreate experience for everyone that is sitting in a table feels great. How we can recreate this experience for people to gather together and have a participation one with each other, and also making them feel comfortable. So that particular moment is what we're trying to connect and design for. So we are not designing just for the food, just for the meeting, just for the room, but we're designing for this particular experience and how we can recreate an atmosphere for this. So this is when we talk about in experience design. So then we talk about sensorial experience and stimulation. Let's say sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And we all understand that when we talk about sight, we never think about an image. And this is something very important for students, because when the students do something, they always focus on renderings and not in the experience itself. So this is very tricky and this is very dangerous. You don't have, we never stand in a place looking towards a view. So we see everything like in a cinematic, in a movement. So we have to understand the space, not just in a simple snapshot or an image, but in a space. So this is very important. And the sequencing, how you move around and how you feel the space when you're moving in a particular place, in a particular design. Then hearing, noise and sound. And here, when we talk about hearing, it's not just the sound of the music, but it's how the food sound. And remember that food also has sound, like if you're eating tostadas or any other noisy thing, or toast, or sipping a soup. So there are different sounds that we need to understand and care. And also, we just talk about sound when we're talking about music, smell, motivation and fatigue, like when you got to the restaurant and it smells fantastic, but also our nose gets to a fatigue. You sometimes you don't smell anymore. So this is important. And and then taste and touch, haptic and proprioception. And proprioception is the relationship between you and what surrounds you and how you move and move into the space. So finally, we're gonna talk about different strategies, and I would like to share some of the projects I have done and how we use these strategies within the projects. And this is something very interesting because I've been focusing on this book that I read from that is called Cognitive Strategies, which is Anne Sussman and Justin B. Hollander. And what is interesting about this book is that we've been doing this for a while, but in this one they put these 5 factors which are very interesting for me to use and then to share with you. And I will tell you why I'm using some of these strategies and why I want to point out these 5 strategies and how we use it in our projects. So our strategies for most of our projects, and I will share three projects. One is cost effectiveness, and this is one of the strategies. The other one is average ticket report. And the final is design narrative and the holistic experience. When I talk about cost effectiveness, it means that we have to work with clients that are very demanding on if this restaurant is going to be successful or not. And when a client comes to you and said, I'm going to do this project, this is my business model, but I'm going to invest a lot of money. So how can I check if this is going to be feasible, if this is going to be cost effective for the amount of money I'm going to put on this project? So we don't know, there's no exact formula, but we can do something in order to recreate what they want to do for their business model and make sure that what we're doing, it has the right investment, it has the right time, it has the right strategies that we're using. So I will share this project. It's Club Union. Club Union is a project that I designed for Club Chivas. Club Chivas in Mexico is one of the most famous soccer teams. And they have this big stadium that was, it opens like 5 years ago. So it's a huge thing in Guadalajara. And they wanted to create a bar just for the people that owns these particular spaces. These spots, I can remember the name in English. What? Boxes. These boxes that are very, very particular. So they want to have a special bar for these clients to enjoy and meet the team members, and also to present team members to the press, and they also wanted to create a perfect experience for the team players as well. So they wanted to create these bars. So they said, can you do this bar for us? But we need to check if this is going to be cost effectiveness. So we're still working on this project. This is a project that is fairly new. We did it last October. So they told me this is going to be secret. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't have to know anything about this. Of course, I'm sharing this project with you, but what I'm saying is secret. Is like, it has to have this feeling that you may want to go there, but it's kind of secretive that it exists somewhere in the stadium. So the place is the basement of near the parking space. There's the stadium goes like like a volcano. So inside this place there are a parking garage, and they select a very, very deep down area of 300 square meters. And they said that's the area you're gonna use for the bar. And you can see those are the parking spaces. And there's the field in the middle. The part that you see in white are the benches, the area for seeing at a certain level of the stadium. So this is the space, and we needed to create different strategies for this. So we were trying to find the occupation of the space and see how many people can we have, because they asked us to have a big bar in the middle, and then we realized that it's not feasible or it's not cost effectiveness. So we needed to create more space. So we were doing different strategies to recreate what we want to see. And I found that if we create this strategy of thigmotaxis, which means that you bring all the main users or the main diners towards the walls, like a thigmotaxis mean that people walk towards the walls. So people tend to walk closer to a wall. So what we wanted to recreate is bring people towards the walls and leave the center empty instead of having a bar. So we could fit more people. And then in the center, what I did is a very, the space that you can see here, this is very flexible. So we have furniture that you can move somewhere else. So this was one of the schemes that had some amount of people, 153 people can sit in this area. Well, we have a kitchen here. I didn't want to show the restroom, but the restroom is here. So this is the back of house. And then we had to have security, also some security needs. Like let's say we have an entry here, we have another entry here, and then we have another entry here. That's also, this works as an emergency exit. So, but this one was the good one. So we recreated a space where players can be, and this is kind of a scenario. And there are different, because of the height, it's very short height. So we had to work having a ceiling that can simulate that is higher than what it really is. It's around 3 meters. And we needed to have a space that can be very flexible, but at the same time that can look higher, and at the same time having a lot of people sitting around. So we recreated 2 bars. And the concept or the project involves community and how we got together with community and how this is a very important part of the society in Guadalajara, and also thinking about the true heroes, that people that makes the team players, which are this is the guy that sells bread in Mexico. They use bicycles and they bring bread in these bins. And then we have this guy that plays, I can't remember the name, but it's a musical instrument in the street. Maybe you have seen it. And this is the guy that, janitor. And this is the guy that sells tacos. So we recreated these trophies for the real people, no, that creates it. So we were trying to connect with community at the same time. But this is not the part that is important for cost effectiveness, but I wanted to show you this. So we work in some materials. I don't know how we're on time. And this is the result. So I'm going to be very quick with this. So we could feed the amount of people that we wanted, and these are some of the interiors. What we wanted to create with this experience is that you go inside kind of the secret hallway, and then you get inside. You know? Part of an important part is recreating the scenarios, leaving the center empty when we needed to have another purpose for this area. And then we recreated these kind of skylights with mirrors, so it could feel a little bit higher. The space can feel higher than what it already is. So one of the things that we are doing is that we're not touching the walls of the stadium. Everything has to remain the same as it is, so all the materials come out because maybe they need it in the future for other purposes, so we cannot touch the walls that are concrete made. And we cannot touch the floor as well. So there are a lot of references for the group, like the lines and things like that and so on. So, and some of the memorabilia of the space. But this was important. So all the installations and piping is there. So we need to respect that as well. And this is a scenario that these doors open and maybe there's a party and then behind that curtain or behind those doors, it opens and then the team players are there. No? So it's kind of a making a spectacle and fantasy. This is something that we work for, so for the experience. Some of the VIP areas. As I said, everything there has to be untouchable. All the walls, we cannot touch the walls. So that's why we recreated these scenographies on top of what is already there. Well, some other images. And then another strategy that we use, and this is an average ticket report for food and design. So we created this bar in Guadalajara, which is called Patan. And this is a bar that was for 5 girls, and they are the owners, and I felt very proud of them because they were doing this bar for their own, and this is craft beer. And I got this place. This was an old restaurant, really terrible place, and awful food, and it looks like this. So when I saw this place, I said, well, what can I do here? No, it's going to be a very complicated thing to do with this awful place. So everything looks really bad. And they needed to have cost effectiveness, but also to increase the ticket report without losing beer. And why I'm saying this, because when you are serving a craft beer, you have to be very careful where you put the tanks, because the hose that comes out with the beer, that small hose can hold almost a beer. So if it's outside of the tank, it becomes warm and then you lose that part. So you might lose 1 beer if you're not using that tank at the moment or just right on time. So we need to recreate a space that could be cost effectiveness, but also that they cannot have losses or they cannot lose beer. So this is what you see in red is what I demolished. And I wanted to see if the house can support the structure. So this is the floor plan. So what I recreated is a staircase that can hold behind or underneath the staircase all the fridge, all the beer. And then we have the space, an open space. And here again, what I'm doing is these strategies for people to sit and be seen. This is important because when you are in a bar, everyone wants to be seen. So you cannot seat people at the same level. You have to seat people at different levels so everyone can see. So what I suggest is always to put people in stools or in high tables around in the surroundings, in the walls, in the perimeters, and then having lower chairs in the center. So you have different views like in a stadium so everyone can see each other, because people go to restaurants to be seen, no? And see people, of course. So this is something that and part of the concept was to recreate a bar in a neighborhood that is already kind of the hipster up and coming neighborhood. So we needed to create this bar that it looks like it's been there forever. So we created a space that looks like this. So this is the area, the photo that you saw before is this space. And what I did is I demolished these walls. We recreated this staircase, and behind this, we have the tanks and the fridge. So this chamber holds all the beer, and so we don't lose any product because it's right there. And an important part is, and this is something that we also use as a strategy, we decide that everything that goes from this level down, you cannot touch. So I ask the clients, you cannot touch, but everything that goes from here to here, everyone is allowed to graffiti, to do whatever they want, because this is part of what we want as experience, that people feel like if they do a graffiti, then they belong, the place is theirs. So somehow you connect with people. So we allow people to do these kind of things, and everyone they get there, they scratch the wall, they put their signatures, they do their drawings, and this is very important because people then feel this is their bar and it's been there forever. This is some of the details that we created for the bar, and then what I was saying underneath that, the staircase. This is the staircase, just right underneath is a chamber. And this is part of what I was saying, that we tend to put people in higher stools in the perimeters and people in lower stools in the center, so everyone can see each other and you don't block the views. And also the use of mirrors, so everyone can participate from the view of everyone. So if you're sitting next to the wall, then you have a mirror and it's at the same height as your site, so you can have a view of the whole restaurant. So these are more creating fantasies and experiences for people that goes to this space. And the final project I want to show is when you're designing with a narrative. And I know everyone here is an expert of creating concepts. And this is important because when you are creating an idea, you have to connect with your client and their ideas as well. So I designed this project. This is my design. I'm just kidding. It looks like it, right? But no. This is a restaurant that used to sell chicken, like kind of fried chicken or yeah, roast side, yes. And it's funny because they asked me, they wanted to create a restaurant for pasta and steaks in a very small town in Mexico. And I said, why you want to do pasta and steaks? You're not an expert doing pasta and steaks. And that's like the common thing that everyone can do here, and it's going to be really bad. So why don't we work in a project that is a little bit different? And these guys were amazing because they're very young. They're younger than me, and one of them is my brother, and I convinced him to do some of my opinions. And he said, well, okay, let's hear my big brother. No, he said. So it was kind of a very interesting experience because I wanted to be also a partner, and at the end I'm not. But I regret that a lot because now that I'm so successful, this restaurant, I'm like, why? I don't get my shares, you know. But this is very interesting because this project, since they wanted to do this idea of having this restaurant in a small town, and I believe that we could do something more. So we invite a chef, Antonio de Olivier, which for some reason I got to be friend, and he's a very famous chef in Mexico. And I got to be friend of him because one of a good friend that we have in common introduced us to this guy, and he was such a nice guy. So I told him, we're trying to create this restaurant in Ciudad Guzman, and maybe you can help us. And he said, well, I don't have time. And I said, well, please come to Ciudad Guzman, and then we'll show you the town, and then we take you around. You have to eat from the market, you have to eat from the street vendors, and then you decide if you want to do the restaurant or not. And he was very kind, and he went there. And we had an amazing time with him because he stayed there for 2 weeks. And he wanted to do some experimentation. So he started experimenting with food, with local cuisine, with people that were there. And then he said, yes, I will do the project. So we need to find out how this project is going to be, what type of restaurant in a small town that we don't know if this is going to be successful or not. So we got this place, and this is the space inside. And I didn't know what to do because it was so bad and in bad conditions that I needed to work a lot with them and with the investment. So at the end, we create this, this is part of the process that we demolished almost the whole thing, but also we wanted to be respectful, and we created a narrative. And the narrative goes like this. So when you are in Ciudad Guzman, people tend to say, they never say, I'm from Ciudad Guzman. They always say, de Guzman, like I'm from Guzman, but without saying Ciudad, because the name is Ciudad Guzman, but they call it just Guzman. So we said de Guzman, it means like I belong to Guzman. So I said, okay, let's do this name, de Guzman, and then we create the naming of this place is gonna be de Guzman. So the Guzman is a cuisine that is local, but it's a kind of a twist of what's going on there, because people are not going to go there to eat a tostada that they can buy for 20 pesos in the market and eating the tostada of 100 pesos here because it's gonna be costly because of amount of investment that is going to be there. So we didn't do tostadas, of course. So we had to create a special menu for this. So we work with our clients trying to figure it out what type of food can we design so people can come here and not feeling that, you know, I could eat this in any other place in the city and not be paying a lot of money for this. So we recreate this as an idea. So the restaurant is quite big. This is the kitchen. This is the main room. So we separated this with a wall. So this is kind of the beer area, and this is the food area, even though they work together very well. So we had to have references. So part of this concept and this narrative was, how can I bring some of the ideas of Ciudad Guzman, of this place, of this town, to my project, and how can I connect the feelings of people and feeling that this place belongs to them. So some of the ideas, and this is very pragmatic, because I said, okay, let's work in a structure that looks like the train station. So we created kind of a similarity between few elements of the city that were translated to this building that is very simple. So we created this idea of bringing some elements of what people already know and are related to, and introduce it in an architecture or in interior design. So this is a very important thing for the town. They do this pilgrimage for, you know, San Jose and Joseph and Virgin Mary. So they do these celebrations and they do these festivals so that are very important for the town, and these are the traditional colors they use. So if I'm doing a restaurant that is calling about the town, that is, the name is De Guzman and is related to the town, I have to bring some of the same colors in an interpretation of the design. So part of the narrative is bringing all these elements from the town, from the tradition, to the design as materials or as elements that are becoming part of it. So part of it is involving community. So we call local artisans to work with us and help us to design these spaces. This is a divider between the brewery and the restaurant. So we needed to have this separation, and we invited artisans to do the work for us. So we film everything. So that's part of the community. When you talk to the community and said, you know, this is yours and everyone is participating from this, then you become part of the narrative and people connect easier with your projects. This is the wall that it ends. You know, these chairs that are called Acapulco, the Acapulco chair. So these are made from the same material that the Acapulco chair. So it is very cheap and it could be done very easily. And then the food, no? Of course, we talk about food and what are this guy, the chef I was telling you, he's from Mexicali. So he has this cuisine that is very fresh and with seafood. So he recreated this, he mixed some of the traditional food from there, and then he created new restaurants, new recipes there. So this is the space at the end. This is what we work. And these ropes are done in the town. And all the food is cropped there. Is everything, all the products are from the same city. So like chocolate, like blueberries, like cherries, everything that is used in the restaurant. Avocado, Ciudad Guzman is a place that they grow avocado, they grow blueberries, strawberries, and tomato. So all those foods, all those products are from the town. So they're very proud of saying, you know, we are using local products. So everything is from local products. So the food is very good. The food is amazing there, and the dishes are amazing. So I think the place is, what it was very important for us is to see the results and what is happening within time. And when we started this project 4 years ago, they started with a ticket, you know, average ticket of 180 pesos, which is around, how much? Like $10. And right now it's 350, which is twice, you know, twice what happened before. So this is an important part, because then we create now a community that really loves this restaurant, and everyone that goes there or goes to Ciudad Guzman, they wanted to take their families, their relatives, their people that visit the town to this restaurant, because that becomes part of the city. Now it's kind of a landmark for the city. which is part of what we do as architects and designers. So we have to focus on in the user experience, but also understanding what's going on with the local communities so we can attract them, we can make them part of your projects, and then everyone becomes part of the project itself. No? So this is some of the projects. I'm going to show you this small video. So, yeah.
I want you by my side so that I never feel alone again. We need to fetch back the time. And I want you, we can bring it on the floor. Never danced like this before. We don't talk about it, dance alone. Do the boogie all night long. Stone in paradise.
And this is a crazy chef.
Animal!
I'm sorry if you get hungry. So this is part of the projects we're doing, and now I would like to invite Patricio to our table. So we are going to have some panel discussion, but we'd love to hear your questions, and Patricio will tell us about the experience between the architect and the chefs and how the client has a different point of view of what we think as architects and our ideas of architects. So I invite Patricio if you want to join me. Can we turn the lights on? It's here, right? Is it here? No. Yeah. So Patricio is a... yeah, we can...
Can I see the back of my seat?
Yeah, or do you prefer we stand, or can you see it? Perfect. No, it's okay.
Are you tired?
Yeah, no, just kidding.
Exactly.
Yeah, wherever you feel more comfortable. So I have here a few things we want to share. And one of the things is I would like to ask Patricio, because, you know, I talk about the projects, my projects and what we have done, but sometimes it is different, the perspective of the chef. And in this case, what we want to discuss is what is the experience between user, client, and chef, and architect, a common language of interactions. When you are the chef and then you come to the architect, what are the first things that you need to meet with the architect?
Anyone have like a stab at it first?
Anyone? If you were a chef
Is anyone here a chef?
or you like to cook? No? Anyone? Yeah.
I mean, I would say like health safety is like the first thing you would find when it gets taken care of. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Health and safety? Yeah. Important. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Anyone else? Circulation, flow, equipment, back of the house, efficiency. What else? you're very efficiency focused because everybody got it. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yes.
But I'm the chef, so obviously starts with the food. And when we talk about food, in case of the last point in the Guzman, the experience is what matters. So for me, the people I worked with, even on some of the projects that Luis has worked with, it starts with what's the menu and the experience you're trying to create through the food, and the comfort of actually eating for pleasure, not for necessity. We all need for necessity ultimately, but it's the pleasure and the experience that will drive people to a successful restaurant, and it's the food that people come back to. So there's a lot of statistics on 20% of the menu gets 80% of the sales. People order usually the same things. If they can have their way, they would sit in the same table they sat at the first time, or they sat the last time they had a really good time at that place. So all these connections that people are making with the experience, the strongest one will be related to food. And that's why, from a chef's point of view, is what do I want to cook to get these people excited? And then Luis can figure out how to make it safe, how to make it flow, how to make it efficient, how to make money off of it so that I can keep doing what I like doing, basically.
One of the things that I always encounter with chefs or with clients is that clients they always said, I want this concept of the space and I want to create this restaurant like this or that. And they come with a lot of ideas, with a lot of photographs. But then when I ask them, yeah, but what type of food are you preparing and what type of food are you selling? They always said, well, but I'm not quite sure because we have just 2 or 3 dishes to sell. But what about, I think one of the most important things that you have to do when you are a designer is asking what's the type of food that you're having. Is that a right answer? Is that a right question to ask to the person or no? Like what type of food should we design for the food or should we design for the experience, or the interior design will play a role, or is just the food? What do you think?
Depends on what you mean with type. So for me, the type of food is it about Mexican or the country of origin, or is it type of food around the special ingredients or the local experience for Guzman? Because when you're designing for the experience, I would tend to forget a little bit about the actual origin of the food and try to connect with the people that are going to be eating there. So I don't have a professional restaurant, so I'll just come clean with that. I cook a lot for my own pleasure, and then entertaining parties, cook a lot for friends, and I do a lot of research on cooking. So I was just down in Oaxaca last week learning to make tortillas from scratch with a native woman up in the hills or something. So it's something that I do for myself, but then I want to bring those experiences to, I know, people that appreciate it. So whenever I think about designing a menu for a party, I always think about, well, what's the experience that I want to create in that party? Is it an intimate friend party? Then I need food that creates intimacy, food that's not too elaborate, too difficult to eat, because then it starts distracting from the moment of talk or the intimate moment that I want to create. If I want easy food for like a light conversation and actually people end up dancing on top of the table, then I need to prepare my food differently. I need to think about it differently because I need foods that will create that experience. So when I think about type of food, I don't think cuisines, I think experience, and then tie that back to what's the type of food that gets me that experience.
It's because what happened as an architect, and maybe you are in the same page as I am, you always think about how it's going to look the space, like what's going to happen in the table, but with the surroundings. So for me, that's one of the most difficult parts, because every time someone approached me to design a restaurant, the first thing that comes to my mind is, how can I design this space? It's going to be dark, it's going to be light, it's going to be bright, it's going to be with color. What are these elements of the space that I will need to bring to this table so people can enjoy better their food. So you're saying that maybe it's not about that, and this is something that we already discussed, but it's more about what you want to do with the food or with the experience of eating that food that would make people behave in a certain way. And this is one of the questions that, I'm intrigued, because maybe we don't talk about this, but what about food that creates certain feelings when you're eating? And let's talk about comfort food, and if you can talk about how can we make people to feel passion about it? How can we make people to be hot, to be cold, to feel, I don't know, different sensations within food, but also related to the space?
So, question out to the audience first. So, who likes comfort food? Who craves comfort food from once in a while? Like, almost everyone. But what's your comfort food, Allison?
It's
Sweet. So that's your comfort food. Kurt, maybe? Fried chicken.
Nice.
Tatiana. Soups. Someone in the back.
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti. What's your name? Nick. So Nick likes burritos. So comfort food means a feeling. It doesn't mean a specific food. It means a feeling. So there's a lot of different ways. The Chinese have actually a 5-element model that they use. It's wood, metal, water, fire, and earth. And they balance the meals based on that. And they're all tied not only to the feeling that you want to create, but actually a balanced way of eating. So, Asians tend to look at things more holistically versus Western cultures, which we tend to look at kind of more, individual or compartmentalize things, but they look at it from a holistic point of view. So when you design for an experience, you can use that to create an ambiance where people will actually be more lively. So you would do red wine, you would do steaks, you would do strawberries and chocolate as dessert, you would do berries, all sorts of berries, and you wouldn't do, mashed potatoes, and you wouldn't do starches, and you wouldn't do heavy things, because then people don't want to get up and dance and be energetic. They want to just sit and relax and have comfort. So there is a lot to those elements that you can actually design for experience. And the important thing about the connection there is not just about the food. Context matters, and context matters a lot more than we think. I started my career in marketing, which was a completely different story, but it's related to what I'm doing now, because I think that's when I decided to jump into the rabbit hole of human behavior. And I'm still tumbling down. I haven't gotten quite yet to Wonderland, but part of it is because we're so infinitely manipulable that it's a little scary, but it relates to the context.
So one last question, and then we would like to hear from you guys. And how an eating experience get to completion, according to a chef?
So the interesting thing is that from a brain's point of view, so from the brain perspective, because you heard me talk about neuroscience and leadership as well, but the actual experience can be complete even before it starts.
Okay.
As soon as you walk into an environment where, if you think about the brain and you think about the only function of the brain being keeping you safe, it's not to make you happy. It's not to, its main function is to keep you alive and to keep you safe. So when you talk about those examples of these walls that nobody can look out, it's design responding to a human need of safety. So for me, that experience can begin or can be complete as soon as I enter the space where I feel safe, and then I suddenly can relax. And I don't care so much about, I'm not going to be nitpicking on everything anymore as soon as I feel that safety, as soon as I feel that familiarity, as soon as my brain goes from a little bit of threat to that reward state that we talk about in brain perspective.
So it's interesting because then at the end we're talking about atmosphere, and architectural elements that will complete, that will make the food experience into completion, right? Well,
and everything. I mean, your brain will be scanning for these things all the time, which is the fascinating thing about the brain. It's constantly scanning for these threads. And I don't know who likes to sit with a back towards the door. Does anybody feel uncomfortable like when you sit at a restaurant and your back's directly? So that's part of that feeling. You get up in an elevator, the first thing you do when the door closes, if the elevator's empty, you turn your back to the wall. Like nobody stands in the middle of the elevator, just kind of casually, this is really, everybody just kind of take a step back unconsciously. And that's just evolution. That's just your body protecting, your unconscious mind protecting you from possible threats. So anytime you enter an environment, the experience starts with that sense of, am I at ease? Am I in a calm state, or I'm going to respond to some threat? And you can trigger threat through a bad service. You can through a bad, the annoying table that moves in a restaurant, right? Like anybody's been annoyed with, why is this thing moving? I can't cut my steak. So everything is important. But if you think about that simplicity of the brain, that it just gets annoyed by all these things, then you can design for a better experience.
Great. So we would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, and please tell us what you think about, about what we're talking about. Yes.
It would be interesting to hear from both of you about your thoughts on the open kitchen concept.
Okay.
And do you prefer it or not in the experience of the diner or guest being involved in the process of the preparation or engagement with who's preparing their food?
I remember now the book that I was telling you. The name of the book is The Perfect Meal. And it flipped the author. It will come. Before I hope it will come. Before I leave, it will come. And I'm telling you about this book because they talk about this issue of the open kitchen. And the open kitchen was kind of introduced maybe by the mid-'80s. The first restaurants that were trying to show this was more portraying of the chef cooking for people. So it was more like trying to portray as the star chef or celebrity chef. So people can come to these restaurants and see this amazing chef that I was cooking for them. And what happened with these restaurants is that people started noticing that they were very stressed out. And people, the chefs and the people who were behind, they were feeling so stressed that they couldn't behave the way they wanted to behave. And sometimes they were swearing, they were saying things that people shouldn't be listening, because you're preparing their food. So somehow you have to figure out which is the right strategy according to the atmosphere and according to the type of restaurant. In my case, I'm designing different types of restaurant. It depends. We have open kitchens sometimes when the food is related to a street. Like let's say I'm designing right now a fonda, which is a restaurant, like typical Mexican restaurant that you eat sopes, tostadas, pozole, very, very traditional food. And we are trying to relate this with the street vendor. So with people that were, cooking, the old lady is just cooking there and everyone is watching their food and everything looks clean because you can see what's going on with your dish that you are very familiar and it's kind of a comfort food. So in those particular projects, it's very good that you show people, their food is coming from a safe preparation. So, but in the case of a star, and that happened also for David Rockwell in one of the restaurants that it was in New York at the Lincoln Center. It was called Gray. And what happened with Gray, it closed because the restaurant was facing, the kitchen was facing a huge curtain wall that goes towards Central Park. And people couldn't see the view of Central Park. And the main idea of this chef that I will remember the name. And the thing that happened with this is that the kitchen was blocking the view. And everyone was kind of complaining what happened, why they did that. And they wanted to show the spectacle of creating the food, but it didn't work because everyone was so stressed and the chef and all the cooks, everyone was really, really stressed out, so they couldn't go. The restaurant closed after 2 years. Café Grey was the name of the restaurant. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it depends on the type of cuisine and on the type of food that you're preparing, that you might have the right answer, having an open kitchen or a closed kitchen. Pato.
I mean, from the kind of psychological point of view on the open kitchen, there is evidence and research around the transparency of it, right? So people that feel that they're being watched will tend to be more disciplined around certain things, right? Mm-hmm. So if you put a tip jar, even if you print out some eyes, not actually a physical person, but they've done some research where you have some eyes printed on the page, people are more likely to put money in the coffee money pit, whatever, versus not. So the psychological effect is important. So it depends on what you want to create. For the big kitchen, I mean, I think it's more of that transparency and more of the trust that you can build with, oh, my food is being handled, and there's hygiene and there's safety. From a kind of intimate experience point of view, then I think about the 12-seater sushi bar where the chef is cooking right in front of you and is preparing your meal. And I almost equate this to a bar where, I don't know, anyone lived in New York? Tanya, I think you did, right? So anyone lived in New York for a long time? Or even here, do you have like your favorite bar close by? Do you know the bartender by name? Right, so you start creating those personal and intimate relationships. So for me, it goes back to that experience, right? Mm-hmm. So do I want to cook in this little restaurant as I feel as I'm cooking for a friend, where he's actually sitting in front of me and I'm preparing and having a conversation and actually can get to know him a little bit? Or do I want to be isolated from the experience and focus on the food and get the compliment through whatever little ballad that they'll say? But it just depends on the chef, probably.
Could you quickly just talk about the role of light in especially your type of like architecture, and as well colors when it comes to subtraction and addition of colors? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but if you do you think about that when you create those spaces, or?
You know, I think, yes, of course. We think for me, it's more the relationship between how color is related to the type of project, to the concept of the project. And we have to be very careful with color because, you know, there's a lot of theories that tells you you should use color in this way or in that way. But I totally don't trust in what we have, to be honest. And one day, one person came and said, you know, you shouldn't be using blue because blue is a really bad color for restaurant. And I started doing some research, and it's true. Blue is somehow makes people feel like they are already full. You know, like if you have a blue plate and then you eat from a blue plate, then you feel that you are already full, like for some reason. But also I tend to think that we don't see colors as, you know, like you might see one color and I see another color. We never know which color and in which spectrum of light you're getting to see the color. So for me, it's not that deepness on the understanding color and how it works, or it's more related to what is the ideology of the people that I'm designing to. So I'm always trying to bring those more important factors about culture and ideologies of the group into the project. And like this project I did, it was very colorful, but I didn't say to people, you know, I use this color because of this. It's just something that is kind of subliminal in there, and the color is part of it. It's an important issue that everyone can relate to without telling them that that's the reason and that's the purpose of being there. Or in the case of other projects, I try to use color to upgrade an area or to make more interesting, or etc. and so on. I don't know if I answered your question, but it goes more to understanding the ideology of the group and the user experience, which is the most important part.
First, I just want to say I really appreciate your use of the vernacular or like local culture inside the restaurant. Could you speak a little bit about that process and some of the feedback that you've gotten from customers that came through and appreciate that or recognize that you've made this subtle detail that, you know, took hours to do or, you know, a lot of
Yes.
people were involved in it?
You know, this is also something that happened with these particular clients. And I have to say, most of our clients are very commercial. So we need to work understanding what they want to do. And we do a lot of, and I know you do it here, is design thinking. You know, we connect with the client. We do a lot of workshop before doing something. I mean, we never start from scratch, like, this is the great idea, and I come here and I put it in the table. So every time I work with my client, I try to understand as deep as I can what they are trying to tell me. So the vernacular part of the projects is because of them, not because of me. And it's because it's part of important, it's an important part of the process of the designing the project. I'm never considered myself of the designer that is doing this project for a group or for a client, but I'm considering myself more like as a tailor that works with them, as a consultant, as part of the team that are designing a project for a specific client or for a specific purpose. So we connect with them. We need to sit with them and understand that this is something that they are investing, they're putting money. You know, I do a lot of houses as well, and the process of houses are totally different. I enjoy a lot of the restaurants because it's a lot of fun, you know, and you get to eat a lot, and then you have a lot of free meals, and then you have a lot of drinks. And you know, one of our clients opened a tap for us, and for a month or so we were really happy. So it's kind of this type of things, you know, you connect with your client in a different level. However, when you are designing for a house or for a residential project, it's totally different. You sit there, you know the family, you with them. But in these cases, you get to know community, you get to know a group of people, a bunch of people. So we interview the waiters, we interview the cooks, we interview chefs, and we sit with them to work, like the methodology of design thinking, no? And you do prototyping. I never mentioned, but we do different types of design of layouts, and then we test. So we have 1 week opening with a certain layout, and then we check if that's going to work. And every time we design something, we make it modular. So we recreate this. We can do different layouts, different arrangements of furniture. So we know that it might not work the first week, but maybe we do different arrangements. Like for a restaurant, we did 7 different arrangements of furniture. So we knew that somehow one is going to last, you know, like one is going to be the good one. And it was like the second one that we did that worked better. But then you give opportunities to your client to feel safe and secure that whatever you're doing, there's another opportunity and there's little failure. You know, there's going to be less failure than if you have more opportunities for the client. I don't know if I answered your question. Good. Yes.
I'll speak up.
Hi.
So, you know, the last part, you know, I was so impressed with what you just said, with what you did with the community. And it made me think a lot about, you know, sentiments. Like, you know, I was thinking about like Water for Chocolate, things like that, you know, in Mexican cinema, and how they do this interaction between emotion and food, and also myth making. So, if the community's coming together and they're having meetings there and local meetings together, are you guys thinking about creating a myth or a space around it, like a sacred space, that everybody relates to go there? They've been there in a certain way. And are you thinking about that in elements to food or in the time?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab at it from the food perspective because the myths already exist. You're leveraging those myths. So when you go out and try to make these projects, you really have to go into what their myths are. What's the special way of preparing their tortilla? What's the one thing that only grows in that region that it's a common taste? With things that people eat since they were children, and what's the smell in the air that they can relate to, and the things that they want to tie back to. Because the brain has an amazingly surprising way of just picking up on those little hints. So there's an example of a restaurant they just opened in Austin a few months ago. It's called Loro. And it's a very interesting concept, but it's been very popular. It's a mix of barbecue, which is the culture of Texas, with Asian. So you have a papaya salad, but that has like an element of Austin cuisine, and then you have the ramen, but it has like the barbecued pork or instead of like their traditional. So you get these little tastes of, oh, and your brain immediately is going, this is familiar, this is. So those myths in food already exist, right? So tortillas in Mexico, pasta in Italy, barbecue in Texas, cheese soup. I was just in Milwaukee, like that cheese soup is, you can't escape the cheese soup, right? So you have to find the best way to exploit the myths in cuisine.
Definitely. I think one of the most important concepts or the most important premises that you have to take is when you're designing, especially for a group, like what are these particular food that they like or they remember or they relate to. In the Guzman, one of the things that we recreate was, there are very famous, we call it palanqueta, which is a nut with sugar, and which is, no, what is it? Yeah, it's like
It's called toffee, yeah. It's like
yeah, kind of a toffee thing. So it's really good, and they're very famous in that town. And the town is, and I didn't tell you the geography of it, but there's a Guadalajara and there is a Manzanillo, which is the west coast in the Pacific Ocean. So Ciudad Guzman is in the middle of both. And before, people used to stop to eat in Ciudad Guzman, and then they just continue their way to the beach, to Manzanillo. So somehow this is in the middle, and a lot of people got to know these palanquetas and these different bread. They used to go there to buy just these, these candies in the way to Manzanillo and the way back. So somehow what we recreate in the Guzman are like beverages that includes palanqueta in a martini of palanqueta. So can you imagine a martini on palanqueta, which is very sweet and you get drunk really quickly, but it's really interesting, no? And then we have a ponche de granada, which is like a pomegranate punch, which is alcohol involved, and then we have tejuino. So there are different food and pastries and candies that we use for dessert drinks, no? But there are alcoholic drinks. So it's kind of a very interesting mix of finding these meats and put it together within the food. And an important part of the architecture, I believe, is because when you're designing a restaurant, like in my case, I love to eat what they are selling, and I know I want to understand what they're selling, so if I can enhance the food through the atmosphere, that's important. And I didn't mention because we didn't have enough time, but there are a lot of strategies to do that. So you can work with texture in the walls if you want to enhance some food. And it's interesting because maybe you can enhance food just by looking at a texture in a wall. And somehow it relays your sight with your mouth. So there are a lot of techniques and a lot of strategies that help you to recreate these things, no? And enhance flavors. I don't know if you want to add something. Yes. Thank you.
I just had a question because the work that you do is kind of really intimate. So like, do you find it easy to kind of like limit yourself? Like if you want to work in, say, a Latin culture, it would be a lot easier for you to continue to work like properly and like with a clear mind if you just stayed like in that culture? Or do you find it easy to just switch between like, say, Latin and then you go to like Asian and then you go to European? Is it like, do you stay within one or do you like move around?
Yeah, because maybe what I show you is very intimate because it's part of the culture, but actually I think you have to be a chameleon. You have to, as I said, our education, like my education was in part in the United States, so I understand a lot of what's going on internationally, and that's an important part that you should also understand because we're all humans, and I believe that maybe it's just a part of understanding, of feeling. At the end, there's a lot of things that connect us, which is the intimacy of food and sharing food with others. So for some cultures, eating from the same plate doesn't disturb the other one, but from other cultures might be an issue. And I believe that this part of understanding, like how can I understand your culture and my culture or any other culture, is part of learning. And if we have the knowledge and we have the education of doing that, and we have, as I said, understanding the other, like we are doing human-centered design, so it's part of it. Oh, it's not that it's gonna be too far from designing one to the other. So you can, you know, maybe I wear a sombrero today, but maybe tomorrow I'm gonna, I don't know, dress another thing. That is not a sombrero. So yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
One of your earlier research references talked about how music changes behavior of the customers. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about dealing with sound and noises in the restaurants in terms of like how it changes the customer's experience as well. Because if you're in a very busy restaurant, you're dealing with a lot of noises from customers, but then I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, how you would approach it in terms of design.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, how can I put it? When you're designing a restaurant, you might have different groups, right? So sometimes there's a restaurant that, you know, I always talk to my clients, I said, what type of food and who's your client? And sometimes they say, well, my clients are teenagers. Okay, good, that's a good group. So I need to design for the teenagers. But sometimes they come with their parents. No, but sometimes there's another group that is coming and they're old people. And so you start thinking a lot of people are coming to these places. There are some particular that you dedicate to certain groups. But when you're working for different groups, then you have to figure out how to zone a restaurant. So for me, restaurants are like cities. You know, like every time I think of a restaurant, I think of an urban plan. So you design spaces for people that might be doing noises and might be doing different types of, they have different needs, for instance, families. No? So you have to think where you can see groups of families, parties of 2, parties of 3, or people that are, you know, smokers, etc., etc. So you have to figure out how to do that. About sound, there are a lot of strategies that you can use, and there are materials that you can use, so you allow the space to feel a little bit, you know, less noisy than other spaces. So, but there are materials. About how can we change the mind of a person, or how can we change the behavior of a person? Of course, there are a lot of other things, like increasing the volume. So if you increase the volume, then people start getting impatient. No, because when you have, and this is funny because there are studies that says that if you have French music in a French restaurant, there is logic that people are going to start drinking French wine because of the, you know, the connection. So if you have Italian food in an Italian restaurant, people tend to say that it's authentic, even though an Italian could say, no, this is not authentic at all. You know, or even Mexican, like you go to this Mexican restaurant and you say, yeah, this is very authentic, and they have piñatas, but the food is terrible, no? And then because this is something that we can relate, and then our brain tends to connect these experiences and making an affirmation of the things that we're seeing. So if you study the brain, you'll see that you can kind of manipulate or seduce in a way that, in a way of people can behave because of what you're showing, because of the environment that you're projecting. So yes, we can increase the sound and people will start drinking. That's for sure. Because people start getting, you know, anxiety. They start feeling excited. Maybe they want to dance, etc., etc. I hope I answered the question.
Hi there. If you were going to start your own cafe and you had a blank slate, but you had a limited budget, what would be the order of that development as far as you came into a blank spot? And what would be the considerations?
Okay. Well, you know, I have most of my clients come like with this question. No, I don't have budget. So, and at the end, we start thinking, how can we be creative? I think one of the like a cafe is a very interesting project because you have to work with the neighbor. So if you're doing a cafe for the neighborhood, then you have to think of the neighborhood. What are the characteristics that makes that neighborhood being what it is? So can you bring some of those, and this is kind of a trend that everyone is doing, like try to figure out how this is going to be the coffee or the corner coffee, like everyone wants to be here. So those are the elements that you should start thinking, like who's the one that is coming to this coffee. So when we think like position ourselves at that level of the street level and understanding who may come here is understanding the user. So for me, it's always understanding the user. You can start with a very low budget and be very successful if you find who's your client, who's the final user that is going to connect with whatever you're doing. So you can have a very, very tight budget and create a great restaurant. It doesn't have to have the luxuries or the elements or the materials, because you can do it very cheap, but if you have a good concept, a good idea, a good understanding of the user, then you're done. I mean, of course, there are other things now, but hope I answered it. Yeah.
Well, from the food point of view, is also what's the most important thing that you want to invest on for that, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
I'm thinking
another
a coffee
thing,
shop, and it's an example that a project that we worked with in Guadalajara. The coffee machine was worth more than the entire locale. Because that was the important thing. Nobody had the machine that could produce that quality of coffee anywhere in like a 20-mile radius. And it's like, we'll just, we'll use little recyclable cups or whatever, but that's where we're going to make our bet on. So it's figuring out what the most important thing is. And if it's cooking,
I would go to that, definitely. I would go to get the best machine. Like if I just have, I don't know, whatever you have the money is
well, the best
just
thing you can afford with your budget.
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly. But like we talked with this before, because there was this guy that just bought a used, coffee machine, a Rancinial, which is very expensive, and then he got it for a very, second hand, and that machine is the best. So he could do the best coffees in the corner, so everyone goes there, and it's a crappy place, but it's the best machine. So, yeah.
I want to maybe conclude because it's late and they're hungry. Of course. And so I want to bring it back a little bit on the issue of design of experience or experience design. That, as you know, now is a buzzword in several related disciplines. But to me, it's very interesting to see how thinking about the design of the experience instead of the design of a place brings design on the strategic level and not on a tactical level, which is as the owner who decides the strategy according to maybe starting from several different points. One is the specific food experience. Some other is I want a fast food that is also, different from the other. So you can have numerous different briefs, but what is evident here is that the role as designers is changing the more we embrace the design of the whole experience. And as you know, in all the disciplines that we have is the same thing. At the point that somebody decided that there are designers of services, designers of experiences, and creating new competencies out there that claim to be the competence of the art direction of all the aspects involved in the restaurant. As you well know, the restaurant, the specific experience of the restaurant comes from, of course, the place, the food, but every single element and touch point counts, right? So the branding, you showed how you came out with the name. That's a profession. That's a design profession. So who's winning between, the interior? Who's taking the lead? So my point is, it's very interesting to observe two phenomena. One is how design becomes strategic, but not necessarily becoming the designer becoming the leader of the whole development, because we have the expert of, you know, how the service is delivered, the food and all the other aspects, but also how finally the design expertise come to a place in which they have to work together. In all the cases I've been part of, there's no a unique leadership, as you know, it can change. I've seen the people dealing with the branding, designing the brief for the interior or the architects. I've seen the opposite way around, but it's very interesting because finally we realize that we're not designing in silos anymore. We design for a unique scope, which is the experience. So we probably don't need experienced designers who, by the way, in the lingo now are those who design the experience with digital products, right? Which is very limiting because it's not the truth. If I design the experience of flying with Southwest or whatever, Alitalia, oh, no, don't do it, never do it. So it involves so many different stakeholders, places, organizations, right? That becomes, the complexity grows. But if we stay on this kind of complex, it's very interesting to see how our job changes. And to me, for them, it's very important to be underlined, because it's not a matter of designing the box for somebody who has to use it. It's not a matter of, you know, at the end of the day, even the interior choices,
they don't care.
Okay, it's part of something else which you have to figure out. So our job is partially changing this direction. What do you think about that?
You know, one of the things that maybe it was my mistake is, or I omit, is that we work with teams. This is not a solo show. This is something that we do with a lot of people. And what I'm saying is, like, when you saw Club Union, I didn't do the trophy design, you know, I didn't do the branding. And this is a group of people that we got together and we figured out, like in my case, I brought my knowledge on a collaborative perspective of strategies that are architectural, that are making cost effective, that are making diagrams to understand how much people can fit in this room and how these translate to finance, and this, how it's going to translate to money and how it's going to translate to investment. But on the other part, like I brought people, like right now we're doing a project that I need a staircase. And we decided that structurally it's gonna work, a spiral staircase. But I didn't design the spiral staircase, even though I can do it, you know, and I know that I could spend my time, but I call an industrial designer to tell them my ideas and what my client was thinking, and brought the client, and we were discussing like few elements that we wanted to recreate in this spiral staircase. So for me, it's more like bringing the right people to work, and it's a dialogue, and it's so nutritive. You find so many ideas, and when I talk to these industrial designers, I learn a lot. I said, wow, I never thought of this, you know, because I was more educated in the traditional architectural, you know, thought. And then when you see these people talking, then you realize, like, yeah, we make a great team. So for me, Toro Pinto, which is one of the branding agencies that I work, is excellent. They're perfect. They understand, you know, we connect each other really quickly. And Gremio Diseño, which is another company that we work, so we do a lot of collaborative work. And I will tell you, we are a very small office. We are an office of 4 people. So, but we have a lot of companies with us. Like we have at least 4 or 5 companies that we work together as collaborative, as outsourcing. You want to
no, I really like the conclusion on the role of designers change, and it definitely has to. And as you embrace not only the experience, but as you embrace the human side, your role has to change. So for me, it's always, start learning about the brain, start learning about human behavior, start learning about psychology, because part of the essence of a restaurant is about nurturing, is about food, is about humans. And I know there's some things about robots now making foods, but I'm gonna die before that.
That's a delicate topic.
So
Don't touch that topic
I'm
with
a
him
romantic,
because he's
yeah.
very sensitive
I'm a
about that.
romantic with that, so I'll die probably before that comes widespread. But you're building a human experience, so the more you know about humans, the better you'll be.
I really want to thank you for your time and for listening to us, and thank you very much for coming this night and being with us. Thank you, Tatiana, again for the invitation. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you.